Hi, I'm Marcus Ryle, and this is the Oberheim OB-X8. And I'd like to give you a bit of a demo of the sounds in the OB-X8, specifically focusing on the sounds where it's recreating the sounds of the original Oberheim OB-X, which I happen to have right here. The OB-X was manufactured from 1979 to 1981. This particular unit was made in June of 1980, and it came with 32 presets. They were in banks A, B, C, D, and numbered 1 through 8. Those 32 presets were loaded in from a cassette tape with data into the OB-X, and this unit has been calibrated to factory specifications and had those original factory patches loaded into it so that we can hear what it sounded like originally. These 32 sounds are not necessarily representative of everything an OB-X can do, and in fact, some of them are could even be considered questionable choices, but it's a great way to demonstrate how the OB-X8 recreates all the circuitry in the audio path of the OB-X so that it can make those same sounds. So we're able to take that same cassette data from the OB-X, load it into the OB-X8, and that is one of the factory banks that the OB-X8 ships with. This demo just has some very simple musical examples so you can focus on the sonic characteristics of the OB-X and OB-X8. It's all recorded in mono with the levels matched and with no effects or EQ or anything like that. So let's have a listen. We start out with A1. This was called Brass Ensemble, and it sounds like this. So you can hear it's using the same two-pole state variable filter as the original OB-X, which was also the same filter that was in the SEMs, the 4-voice, 2-voice, and 8-voice. We'll play some individual notes so you can hear it more clearly. Patch A2 is a clavinet type sound. It's using the two oscillators in pulse wave with the pulse width fairly narrow, and it sounds like this. It's interesting, on this sound you can hear some differences as you go voice to voice, and that's because the pulse width is never exactly the same on each oscillator. So as it rotates through the 8 voices, which it does on both units in the same way, you hear that variation happen like this. Next up is A3, which is kind of a mellow string sound. It's called low strings. A4 is like an electric piano sound, and oscillator 2 is tuned up quite high to simulate the tine. A5 is an organ sound that's got quite a bit of click attack, but that's what the original preset sounded like. A6 is called flutes. A7 is a harpsichord preset. Preset A8 is called lead sync. It's a unison patch that's got oscillator 2 in sync to oscillator 1, and the filter's fairly closed down. and it sounds like this. Now, if you wanted to open that filter up, we can just grab a knob and do it. On the OB-X, you have to hit the edit button first, and then you can open up the filter. Now, this is a unison patch. This particular OB-X has just been calibrated, so it's really quite in tune. This is all 8 voices playing together, and you don't really hear much beating of the oscillators here. On the OB-X8, you can control how much voice detune there is. So if you wanted to be a fatter sound, because most of the time the OB-X wasn't that well calibrated, you can just turn up the amount of voice detune. So with the OB-X8, you've got that as a programmable feature, whereas on the OB-X, if you wanted to have that sound, you need to open it up and detune the oscillators manually. B1's called Classic Horns. B2 is a Celeste. B3 is called High Strings. B4 is called Bells. B5 is called Pipe Organ. B6 is called Swimmy Pad. B7 is called Harp. And B8 is Calliope. Now we'll go on to the C bank. On this particular OB-X, which has the Encore Electronics MIDI expansion, there's actually 120 presets. So it uses combinations of the group buttons like the OB-X8 and OB-8 did. So as a result, the original factory bank C ends up in bank AB on this OB-X. So preset C1 is called Brass in Fifths. C2's kind of mellow percussive organ sound. C3 is called Slow Strings. It's got a very long attack on it. And a long release. C4 is called Res Sweep Pad. It's fairly self-explanatory. A lot of resonance on the two-pole filter with a slow sweep. C5 is a Farfisa style organ. C6 is called narrow vib or narrow vibrato. C7 is called Far's Funk, written by Joff Farr, who worked at Oberheim back in the day. C8 is called stab lead, another unison patch with a sharp attack on it. And you can hear also in the unison mode, the OB-X would not re-trigger if you played legato. On the OB-X8, you can actually have it multi-trigger if you want, so it's your choice, but this preset's set up authentically like the original, so it doesn't re-trigger. Now let's go to the D bank. D1, which is in bank C with the Encore system, is called trumpet. D2 is called sample and hold, and it's using the LFO's sample and hold waveform to control the filter. Preset D3 is called polyportamento. The OB-X had polyphonic portamento, which allowed each of the 8 voices to independently glide from its previous note to its new note. Now, since every time you played a new key, it would rotate through the 8 voices, it almost seemed random where a voice was sliding from, because it just would come from wherever that voice was previously playing. So the sonic quality will be the same between the two instruments, but where notes slide from could be totally different. Preset D4 is called metal percussion, and it's using the cross mod feature or X mod feature of the OB-X, where oscillator 2 is exponentially modulating the frequency of oscillator 1, and as a result, it sounds a bit like a ring modulator, and also it's a little bit different amount of modulation on every voice. So there's some variation you'll hear as we go through the voices, and the OB-X8 does the same thing. D5 is called windy, and windy uses the noise generator to make a wind type sound. The OB-X's noise generator was different than the OB-X8 and OB-8. It used a chip that had kind of a pseudo-random generator, and it was convenient for the design, but in practice actually ended up being not very musical, which is why it was changed out. We opted in the OB-X8 to just do the better sounding noise and not replicate the pseudo noise of the OB-X. So you'll be able to hear the difference of the noise between the units here. So you no longer have the periodicity of the random noise generator of the OB-X. D6 is called square wave mod. We're using the square wave LFO to modulate the pitch of the oscillators, like so. Along with a slow filter sweep. A long release. D7 is called Slow Glide. This is a unison preset. And in this one, you're able to hear how the portamento is not quite the same rate with each oscillator. So as we glide from note to note, they start out of tune and then get into tune when they reach the final pitch. Once they're all the same pitch, they all slide from the same place, but you can still hear how the speed difference has them out of tune as they're traveling. Final preset, D8, is called Spacey X Mod, using the cross modulation once again to create a spacey type of sci-fi sound. So that's a run through of the 32 presets we have from the original OB-X. These were just recorded direct in mono with the levels matched, no effects, no other modifications, so you can just hear the raw sound, and I hope you enjoyed it.